Want proof? Well, look at the top company in the chart. It's Uline Incorporated. Guess who owns Uline? The top individual contributor, Liz and Richard Ulihan. The second highest company contributor is FAR LLC. Guess who owns that? The second highest individual contributor, Tom Steyer. Basically, these individuals use their corporate entities to funnel money into politics to skirt campaign finance laws, and then companies like Hobby Lobby want to cry about not being a separate entity from its owner. Bullshit. Why would all this money be flowing into election if there wasn't a clear and positive outcome to the person donating it? Wealth has the ability to not only influence the political climate, but for some can count as two votes. One from the individual and the other from their company. That isn't democracy, and we should all be concerned about the amount of money flowing in and out of our political sphere. The distribution of wealth is incredibly important to point out as well. This is sort of different than money, since money can just be printed, which has a negative and positive effect on the economy. Wealth is the total value of all things within the country. Once one gains enough wealth, they no longer have to worry because that wealth generates money to live off of. The wealth is then stored and kept in order to work for the individuals who own it. But this means that others cannot own this wealth. It has a negative effect to everyone else in society. Look at this chart. Over the last 20 years, the top 1% hasn't really lost any share of their wealth. Take out the value of their financial wealth, which is the financial non-home wealth numbers. Shit. Look at this chart. Over the last 20 years, the top 1% hasn't really lost any share of their wealth. Take out the value of their home, and the percentage of owned wealth increases for the top 1%. What is interesting is the next 19% of people have been gaining wealth slowly, but the top 1% has stayed steady. That means the bottom 80%'s wealth is being transferred upwards. Basically, the poor are getting poorer. Take away the bottom 80%'s home and they almost have no financial wealth. 80% of the population must share 5.3% of financial wealth. Think about that. In this chart, we can see the assets that contribute to wealth and whom owns it. This is incredibly important to understand. These assets are wealth generating and cannot be owned by more than one person. The top 1% owns more than half of all business equity, financial securities, trusts, and stocks. The next 9% own about 48% of what's left, while the bottom 90% share the last bit of 10%. Most of the bottom 90% has equity in their principal residences and pension accounts. Can anyone point out why holding the majority of your wealth in your principal residence is problematic? 2008 ring a bell? The top 1% have barely anything in those assets. The most damning thing is that the bottom 90% own almost 74% of all the debt, which, if you remember what I said earlier about debt and interest, it eats away their chances of building wealth. According to my source on this, while the vast majority of Americans may own stock, the top 1% own 81% of the total value of stock. Another point I'd like to make about wealth is when individuals own property. While these individuals may pay property tax, the amount of money people can make off ownership of land is staggering. For example, how much money do you think someone makes when they find oil on their property? According to Blackbeard data, if an oil well produces 100 barrels a day and the price of oil is $80 per barrel that month, then the cash flow is 100 times 80, which equals $8,000 a day. The royalty owner who agreed to the 15% royalty would receive 8,000 times 0.15, which is $1,200 a day. Over a month, that brings in $36,000 per month to the mineral owner, who in this case is the landowner. So someone makes $36,000 a month just by owning property. They do not lift one finger to earn any of that money. I wonder why so many people are against renewable energy. But this only happens if you own the mineral rights. You can own surface property and someone else can still own the mineral rights underneath it. I just recently bought a home within a new subdivision and I don't own any of the mineral rights underneath my house. The owner of the land before me still has that right. Fucked up, isn't it? I pay all the property tax, but if minerals are found in mine, it doesn't belong to me.